Okay, 9 months since my schizoid personality disorder diagnosis. Let's do an update. And here's me with my token attempt at doing something with my appearance for a change. Yeah, that's all I've got energy for today. So schizoid, I was diagnosed back in January. So there was that original video I did, and then I've sort of been doing 3 monthly updates, like major updates, and then there's bits and pieces in between because I vlog about my life, and this is just my life. Yeah, kind of chaotic, but that's me. So we'll try and do a proper 9 months update here. I may get a little bit, lost in tangents as usual, but bear with me, whatever. That's how I am. Okay, so I guess in the basics, how I'm doing. A summary of how I'm doing. I think I'm doing better at the moment. So I think for my 6 month update, that was when I was, going through a lot of the trauma processing, I guess, because, realizing that I had the glass child trauma, realizing things that probably made me the way that I am, and getting through that, and how do I talk to my parents about this, and it was a lot. It was a lot to think about, and things that I'd been holding back and, suppressing in my mind and dismissing, thinking, oh no, that was fine, but actually it wasn't fine, and getting through that. That was difficult, but I think I'm past the worst of it. And, I think my mood is picking up as well because I've been able to recover from, recent events that were distressing. So, having to say goodbye to Marley, and also Centrelink stuffing me around. Those were upsetting, but I made it through. So I think that's a sign that I am doing better. Whether that's a result of therapy, though, I can't say. I don't think so. My psychologist at the moment, she's really good. She's the best one I've ever seen, and I've seen quite a few psychologists and psychiatrists who, but so, like, the main thing she does, she actually puts in the effort. Like, it's not just I turn up to therapy, that's when she talks to me, and then forgets about me for the rest of the week. No, what she's got me doing is writing notes for her throughout the week, and she's actually reading them. And obviously she's going to be skimming them because I write a lot and I write chaotically. It's the same as the way that I YouTube. I tend to be very long-winded and chaotic. That's also how I write. But she's managing to, get through the gist of it. And it means that when I see her, I don't have to update her on my week. Like, she already knows, she's already got the gist of what things have been happening, the major events that have been happening. So that's been good to just skip that part of therapy. She already knows, we can just jump straight into looking at the issues rather than me giving an update. And the other good thing about that is I tend to forget what I've been doing through the week. Maybe my life is too repetitive or boring, or maybe I just move on quickly. I find like a lot of days feel really long for me. Like, I know when you're a kid, people tell you, oh, when you get older, the days will pass fast because, your reference, your time reference or something's changed. I don't know. At the moment, I'm not really having that experience. Days take really long. So things that happened in the morning, at nighttime, I'll be like, oh yeah, that happened today. And then things that happened yesterday can feel like they happened a week ago. So, if I didn't have these summaries to explain to my psychologist what's going on, I think I'd struggle to remember. And especially because I'm not using Facebook like a diary anymore. So if I didn't have, that's what I used to do to remember what I was doing in the week. But yeah, no, now it's these notes from my therapist. It just takes me a little while to sit down and go, oh yeah, what did I do on Friday? So yeah, like, I think that exercise may have helped me observe myself a bit better, but it is kind of similar to what I was doing on Facebook anyway. I guess I'm just doing more frequently listing things, because like Facebook, I don't want to be posting on Facebook constantly all day, but with these notes from my psychologist, I can, write everything in a dot point, or not everything. I leave things out sometimes or forget to put things down. I think the main things go in there, and so I guess there's a lot of self-observation and what's going on in my head. Maybe that helps. But as for things in therapy, so we've tried a lot of things. We've sort of touched on a lot of different modes of therapy, doing a bit of revision, because I've been seeing psychologists and psychiatrists for like 15 years, and they've had a lot of approaches. So I already know a lot of this stuff, like cognitive distortions, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, especially in the beginning with therapy, she took me through a lot of that stuff just to get an idea of where I'm up to. And I am already doing a lot of the things that these therapies recommend. So, but we've done cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, dialectical behavior. Dialectical behavioral therapy, DBT, acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT, and schema therapy. I think those are the main ones. I can't remember if there's anything else. And yeah, there's nothing really like, yeah, I get it, but some things don't apply to me, or they're not relevant to me, or else I'm already on it. And so, we'll talk about things. And like, with DBT, it's, saying stuff like we went through an exercise about how to communicate better and, when you're having a bit of a conflict, I guess. The thing is, DBT works better for things like borderline personality disorder, where they're having too many emotions, don't know how to deal with it, tend to lash out. So it's like, slow down, here are some steps to go through. Whereas I think I tend to be a bit too passive, and I'm already doing a lot of these things, perhaps a little bit too much. So yeah, and maybe it helps me think, gee, maybe I should just say what I'm thinking. But yeah, not like I already know the steps, so. Yeah, other things in therapy, I don't know. I don't think therapy itself has done a lot for me, but, having to show up every week or every 2 weeks now, maybe that's keeping me working on things and thinking things. I think, like, if therapy has helped, it's at a subconscious level. Otherwise, I can't really say. So yeah, the whole thing about schizoid being really hard to treat, I think, I'm seeing that. I don't know for sure if it's because I'm schizoid. Also, we're not actually treating the schizoid stuff itself. We're treating, comorbidities and issues I'm having with life. Like, we're not trying to make me heap social all of a sudden. It's more about managing life. So before anyone gets, whoa, this is one of the other criticisms I get, but schizoids don't want to change, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, no, yeah, I don't really want to be a heap social. That's not what I'm interested in. But I need to navigate my life. And so, I'm negotiating between my nature, which is the schizoid thing, but also my reality, which is the world I live in. Like, it's a negotiation between those elements. I would like to function better in the world just so that I'm not getting depressed all the time. And so that's, we're treating the depression or trying to treat the depression. So I don't know. I think that might be too much of a nuanced distinction for certain people on the internet, but I think most of you guys get that, right? Like, anyway. I guess other things, so like, in the past few months, like realizing different things, how differently other people think and feel from me, that's been a weird one, because I've always known that I was different, but I guess I'm like knowing that I'm schizoid, and maybe the notes I'm taking from my therapist, like I'm noticing things more, and I guess it's stuff that I've always known. Like, I've always known that I've reacted differently to, like, world events, for example. September 11, let's not talk about that one. But more recently, like, the Queen's death. And you get these weird things happening where people suddenly care about this public figure that they didn't really know, didn't really put much thought to. The funniest one is a lot of like people who claim to be Republicans suddenly becoming monarchists after watching all the pageantry of the Queen's funeral. That people are weird. And then the other one is people crying over the Queen, like despite not knowing her. And like, I've always felt this a bit weird, when people get upset about celebrities dying despite not really knowing them, and like, I just don't connect on that level, and so, in the past I've said some insensitive things, I think, and that is just bothering me a little bit. That's my obsessive part. I can be a little bit obsessive, not enough to be OCD, but yeah, anyway. Yeah, no, I think in the past, because I couldn't understand that people actually do have feelings for these celebrities, which is weird. But I just, like, I don't know, maybe I thought that they were just getting swept up in a thing, and I guess they are getting swept up in a thing, but they're still feeling this, so I'm sort of noticing those things where people really do think and feel this way, and maybe that explains why people seem so illogical, because they're going with these feelings that I just don't experience, and that makes it frustrating when I'm trying to understand people and they're doing things that they maybe shouldn't but it's because of their feelings, not because of their thoughts. That's not to say that I think in a purely logical way. Obviously, I do have feelings, they just tend to be negative. But I guess because I'm not being swept up in things like romance and sentimentality, maybe I can see a bit more logical stuff in certain areas. But the weakness is it's harder for me to understand the social aspects or the social impact of certain decisions or whatever. Yeah, I'm still getting my head around it because obviously I've never been a normal person. Like, I've always thought this way, like, this is just how I am. So yeah, it's hard to, like, if you asked a cat what's it like to be a cat, they've never been anything but a cat, so they can't really tell you. They can make a guess, but yeah, they can't really tell you. It makes me think of, what is that, the Zeta Project? Is that a bit too obscure for people? And some kids ask him, like, what's it like to be made out of metal? And he just says, oh, heavy. He's never been anything but made out of metal. Anyway, obscure references aside, there's just things like that, the weird things that people do. There was a thought somewhere, but I think it's escaped me, so I should probably just move on. Yeah, I guess just solidifying some of those ways in my head that I am different and I do think differently, and anyway. Yeah, if that thought comes back, I'll come back to it, but I think it's gone. I was talking too much. So other thoughts I've had is, like, on the causes of me being schizoid. Because, yeah, it's a little bit hard to untangle, and in the research, sometimes they say it's trauma and environmental stuff, sometimes they say it's genetic, especially if you've got schizophrenia in the family. And, yeah, when I've been looking at it, so I assumed it was mostly the trauma, going through all that stuff, being a glass child. My therapist said children often aren't angry, and because I think I brought up the topic of anger, like, I don't really feel it, and she said, yeah, glass children don't really. And where was I going with that? I don't remember. Oh my god, I'm getting distracted so easily. Maybe it's these things on my head squeezing my brain. Yeah, no, so sorry, I lost my train of thought. Blah blah trauma. Obviously that has shaped a lot of my life because, the family focus is on my little brother who's disabled, and I have to do a lot of stuff myself, and I feel like I can't ask for help because he needs help more. It's that whole, typical glass child thing, and that's fed into the schizoid. It's probably made my version of schizoid a little bit different because my trauma is not the more full-on kinds of trauma that some people have experienced. It's a bit of a more low-key but ongoing, like, constant thing. I still live in this situation. Yeah, but one thing I was thinking about is a lot of people go through trauma and they don't all end up schizoid. So what is it that made me go the schizoid route as opposed to all the other kinds of disorders that you could end up with? And so that's why I was wondering about predisposition. Like, yes, I experienced trauma, and yes, it was a particular type of trauma, but not everyone with that type of trauma ends up schizoid and, all that. So what is it that predisposed me to take the schizoid route as opposed to any others? And that's where I think actually there probably is some genetic and or cultural stuff going on. And it's mainly what makes me think of that is sometimes my mum has said some things to me or asked me questions about social things that she finds odd. And yeah, that is, like, now that I know that I'm schizoid and I'm listening to my mum say these things, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this must be where I get some of this stuff from. Now, she's not schizoid, but she is not as social as the average person, and she has her own quirks, but she does, have things that she enjoys in life. So, yeah, she's much better adjusted than I am, but does have some similarities. And so that may be a genetic thing that I've gotten from her, or it could be cultural, it could be environmental. Like, I've seen her behave this way, and so I've picked that up. But also, my mum's Japanese, and Japan is a very emotionally stunted kind of culture. They keep everything inside, and it's all about appearances. And the Japan, I think, to this day, doesn't have the greatest mental health awareness or, culture surrounding it. So, yeah, there's a bit of that. I mean, Genetically, her mum was a bit odd, so it may be like something like that. But I think there's also cultural aspects, and so if Japanese people aren't, sharing all their emotions and stuff, then my mum's probably picked some of that up and passed it on to me. And like when I was younger, I visited Japan a lot and was around that kind of thing, and so yeah, that's probably been passed down to me a bit. So yeah, possibly some genetic stuff, but also possibly some cultural kinds of things. And then having that as my background, then I go through this glass child trauma, and then schizoid actually does seem kind of logical as to the route that I would take psychologically. Now, on my dad's side, I think the only thing that might add to that is because my dad is your sort of stereotypical Aussie white bloke, sort of a more like conservative, like the conservative Catholic kind of stuff. But yeah, that Aussie blokey kind of thing where, they don't really share their emotions. And there's that sort of stereotype there. So if I wasn't getting the emotional kinds of stuff from my mum, my dad wasn't going to pick up the slack in the right way for me to develop that healthier, emotional whatever and social things. My dad's pretty social, but yeah, in terms of the way the family dynamic and yeah, sharing feelings was not really a thing in my childhood. So there's a bit of stuff there. I don't know if like some conservative stuff might have added to that. But anyway, so that's just some thoughts on the causes. Yes, trauma, but also why did I take this route? Probably genetic and cultural factors in some mix. Okay, so I want to talk a bit more in depth about therapy. That was the basic summary. I guess if you just wanted that, you can tune out. I mean, I'm sure some people have tuned out already, especially when I lose my train of thought. But so therapy, in my last session, I think my therapist has started breaking down my issues into 4 separate areas, and sort of using that as a framework to try and figure out what's going on with me. And I need to take these off because my brain is, I haven't been wearing stuff on my head. I'm going to have to like get used to it slowly. So we are back to a crazy mad scientist hair that's just doing its own thing. Anyway, so the 4 areas that she's broken down my psychology, my issues, not necessarily just psychology, but my issues and factors contributing to my psychology. So we've got physical, we've got mood, we've got schizoid trauma kinds of stuff, and then we've got dissociation. So we'll go through all those about like what they're about and how I'm doing. So the physical is sort of the baseline thing, and that we can't do a huge amount of that in therapy except maybe to try and shift some of my habits. But physical, I think actually physical might be one of the biggest things that have improved in my life to help me get to a more stable psychology. Like, yes, I know I talked about getting through the trauma stuff and noticing more things, but actually maybe I should have mentioned this earlier. I think the physical has been a huge factor because so realizing the glass child trauma, for a while there, I was thinking like, why can't I sleep? I'm having all these sleep problems and, maybe there's something I'm doing wrong and blah, blah, blah. But the real factor was my disabled brother. He wakes up really early, and at one stage he had COVID, and then after that he was waking up sometimes at 4:30 in the morning, and I go to bed late. I have a later sleep cycle than the rest of the family. I think that might be partly because that was the only time that was really quiet. I think I developed that habit and it's now kind of stuck as my thing. Like, I think that is also a trauma-ish kind of influenced thing. So, there was a period of time where I did try to wake up early, but I found that if I did that, my parents would just make me feed my little brother. And so what's the point of getting up early if I'm going to lose it to do that? So I ended up sleeping in more. And then, yeah, once everyone goes to bed, the place is quiet and I can feel a bit more relaxed, like less crowded. So I think that's how I developed the late sleep cycle. Okay. But everyone else is a morning person. And Mikey in particular doesn't know to keep quiet. And so waking up 4:30 in the morning sometimes, I was not getting enough sleep, especially in the middle of this year. But because of the schizoid diagnosis leading me to think about the trauma, that led me to think, oh shit, this is still happening to me. his sleep cycle is destroying my sleep cycle. And yeah, so it took a while. It took a bit of persuasion, and like my parents took a while to understand that this really is affecting me. But we've now gotten to a point where we'll try to keep Mikey up. Like, he used to go to bed maybe between 6 and 7 p.m., which is quite early, and then yeah, waking up at 5 or 6 in the morning. But now we've shifted his bedtime to be like after 8. Sometimes he'll go to bed as late as 9, and that means he's also waking up a bit later. Thank God that worked. So, you know, maybe 6 o'clock he'll wake up. Sometimes he's actually slept longer, but 6 o'clock, if he can just sleep till 6 o'clock, that extra hour and a half makes a big difference. Yeah, and so now that I'm getting more sleep, and then also once he does wake up, there's a period where I also wake up. I think my brain's gotten into a habit of waking up, but now I can get back to sleep. And then especially everyone trying to make sure that he's not making noise in the hallway, and, you know, trying to keep him in other parts of the house, trying to close doors more. Yeah, I think, you know, the family finally understanding how much it's impacted me. I think they are like, you know, trying to help, especially dad. I think mum is struggling a bit because she gets stressed about dealing with my little brother. So yeah, I think if dad's not around, sometimes there is a bit more noise, and it depends whether we have the morning carer as well to help him. She's only in 3 days a week, but realizing the schizoid and the trauma helped me talk to my parents about these issues, and then that's helped improve the situation for me. Is instead of all the focus being on him, we're now sort of thinking, oh shit, you know, I need help too. And yeah, like, it's difficult, but I've been able to ask for that help, and it's made a difference. And so the physical sleep aspect has improved a lot, and being able to sleep, you know, I mean, this morning he woke up at 5:30, I think, because, you know, the way that we tried to keep him awake last night didn't really work very well. He was dozing off. So, you know, I've got to talk to mum about, we need to make sure he stays stimulated. But yeah, this morning at 5:30 when I woke up, my brain was going through a lot of shit, and I wasn't able to control it because I was too tired. I did eventually get back to sleep, and so now I'm functioning a lot better. But yeah, so, you know, if you're tired all the time, you can't think well, and you do get a lot into those negative spirals, and you can't control it. So, yeah, I know I've rambled a lot about it, but sleep was super important. And, you know, in the past, when I just thought I had depression, I had my things of like sleep, diet, exercise, keeping busy, and there was helping people, but I think now that I know I'm schizoid, that's more of a chore than something that helps me. So sleep, diet, exercise, keeping busy. Those are the 4 things, and they're sort of physical-ish stuff, except for maybe the last one. So sleep improved a lot, has made a huge difference. Sleep diet has not been a problem. You know, once I stopped taking the antidepressants that destroyed my appetite, I've actually been eating better. I'm eating more veggies too, slightly more, not a normal amount of veggies, but more than I used to. And I'm more willing to eat stuff like that. Sleep, diet, exercise. Okay, exercise is a difficult one because if I do too much, then I get really tired. Like after bonsai, I just can't function. So yesterday's live stream, I was pretty out of it, and Patreon saw the test for the live stream where I was even more out of it. I really struggle to function after work. Like when I work, bonsai is a bit more physical, I guess, and then concentrating all day, and I think my eyesight gets a little bit messed up because I'm looking at stuff close up and like focusing too much. So often after work, I'll often get a headache, and then the next day I'll have that headache until later in the evening, and also last week on Thursday when I was in the city, you know, I had psychology, and then I went into the city and I was buying stuff. Like I've got a new gadget to put my phone on the tripod because the old one broke, and I got some stuff for wool, which I've also shown Patreon, which could get a bit out of hand. But, you know, like just going to the city for a few hours, after that, I felt the same as after I'd been to work. I was wrecked, and I could barely function the next day as well. And that's just going to the city. I wasn't even working. So if I do too much physically, for some reason, I'm just not coping with it at the moment. Maybe because of like, you know, 5 years ago, my big depression, sort of huge breakdown, I couldn't work and all that kind of stuff. That period of time, I think, destroyed a lot of my fitness and all that. And then, of course, with the pandemic, I've spent a lot of time just staying at home and sitting around, and I think that's given another hit to my fitness. I'm really not fit. Like, yes, I am a little bit skinny, but that's not from being fit. That's just from not eating a lot and also my metabolism. But yeah, so I just physically, something's wrong with me. I can't do stuff. I get fatigued really easily. So it's hard for me to find exercise that I can do without getting too tired and then not functioning the next day. Because, like, yes, I could do heaps of exercise today, but if I can't keep it up, it's not a sustainable thing. So that's a challenge for me with exercise. I know I should do a class or something. Like, I used to do dance, I used to do taekwondo. But I think it would be too much for me right now, which is a bit embarrassing, but that's just where I'm at. So what I've been doing, I take my dog for a walk most days. It's been a bit hard with La Nina because sometimes it's really wet, but we've had a few more sunny days. And so getting into that habit of taking him for regular walks, but also I've been going on a longer walking route, and that involves this big hill that, I had to do some stuff with my computer, which I still haven't finished making the video for, and it's gonna get too long and I'll forget about it. But I had to pick up a thing from somewhere, and it was down this big hill. And the day after I went down that big hill and then back up again, I went the easy way back up. But my ankles were so sore just from going down a big hill, which tells you what a state my body is in. And that also happened back when I was playing Pokemon Go, like the first time I went on that big hill to try and catch some Pokemon. But I had the ankle issues as well. But then I started doing it regularly and things were fine. I didn't get that pain anymore. So I've started walking that route again with my dog, and it's a longer route. So instead of doing a 15-minute walk, we're now doing more like a half an hour walk. So yeah, I am trying to get more of that exercise in. I don't know if it's helping, but I do need to improve my body because it's just not in a good state. Like, I do stretches and sit-ups and stuff every night, but I need to do more. So I'm trying to do things gradually, going for a longer walk. Now, I'm not the kind of person who wants to go for like an hour-long walk because I have other things that I could be doing. So I think what I need to do next is find a more intense way to exercise or add in something that's more intense. I don't know. But it's something I've got to do gradually. So sleep, diet, exercise, keeping busy. Well, I'm doing YouTube more often. That's helping. And then, doing stuff for Patreon. And so I am doing better at keeping busy now, but I think I needed to get the sleep first to be able to do things like exercise and keeping busy. So that's what's going on with the physical. Has therapy done much for it? Not a lot, but I guess kind of just reminding me, checking in with me. Okay, cool. Physical out of the way. Mood. Mood is something we've tried to address more in therapy. But as I was saying before, therapy hasn't done a whole lot for me. We've talked about stuff, but, I'm not worrying that so-and-so doesn't like me because blah, 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 some kind of, the cognitive distortions, catastrophizing, overgeneralizing. What is the whole list? You can look them up. But, yeah, I guess, the keeping notes for my psychologist and trying to notice things a bit better, maybe that's helped a little bit subconsciously. The keeping notes thing, that was originally based on a CBT thing. I don't know, some of you who've done CBT, sometimes you'll have like a worksheet or something where you're supposed to write down what you're feeling, what you were doing when you were feeling, what you're thinking, and whether there's a distortion or something. It's something like that anyway. I've got it somewhere, but it was based on that. But because I don't have a lot of feelings, like most of the time I'm just neutral. And then I have moments of like depression. So I'm just like going through my life, neutral, crash, or feeling low and that kind of stuff. Like that, yeah, I mostly just have negative feelings, which sucks. But at the moment, just talking about how I've improved again, it's not that I'm happy, it's that I'm just neutral and fine. I'm okay. I'm not depressed. I'm just okay, neutral. Okay, so if as far as my emotional range goes, neutral is up there. So cool, okay. But yeah, so because I don't have a lot of feelings, instead of like writing, I'm having this feeling, here's what I'm thinking, blah, 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 I just tend to write down what I'm doing. Or what I'm thinking about. And I don't always put a feeling attached to it or a judgment attached to it. I'm just like, this is the thing that's happening, blah, 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 blah. Or if I am stressed, all right, this happened, I'm stressed. Okay. It's sort of based on CBT, but we've modified it for the fact that I just don't have a lot of emotions. So I just write about what I'm doing and what I'm thinking, maybe things that I'm noticing, and then occasionally add an emotional note to it. Yeah. So I don't know if therapy. That's all I can think of in terms of mood possibly helping me. Something that we've been trying to do that I've been struggling with is this body scanning thing, and I think this might be tying into a little bit of the schizoid stuff, the numbness. So when I do have an emotion, what she wants me to do is like try and figure out where in my body I'm feeling the emotion to try and like connect more with it. So that I can learn to feel more stuff. But so far it hasn't worked out because when I'm feeling stuff, usually I'm feeling something like really depressed. And when I'm really depressed, I'm not thinking in a logical, observing kind of way. So it's hard for me to stop and be like, oh my God, I'm so depressed. Where is this in my body? I usually don't remember that I'm supposed to do that until I've calmed down a bit. And by then it's a little bit too late to pinpoint where it is. And then I start overthinking because I'm like, oh, maybe I'm feeling it here, but actually maybe I'm only thinking that because now I'm focusing too much. I'm trying to notice stuff too much. So that one's been difficult. And also I don't have a lot of emotions that frequently. So trying to do that exercise, I'm not having a lot of success. Most of the time I'm just sitting around being neutral. Yeah, the only thing that I really know that I do feel is more related to dissociation, so we'll go to that later. But mood, yeah, that's mood related stuff. Okay, so with the schizoid trauma stuff, well, I guess that was kind of tied into that exercise. I don't know, we really haven't made a whole lot of progress. I guess we've talked about some of the stuff, some of the trauma stuff, but I don't think any particular insights from therapy have helped. Yeah, it's really hard to say. I think a lot of the trauma stuff has just been me thinking about stuff, realizing stuff, and then getting used to the idea that yes, this is part of my reality. And I don't think anything in therapy itself has really helped me there. In terms of socializing, like my psychologist has not pushed me to do more than I need to. Yeah, and I think also since I got the schizoid diagnosis, I've actually been less inclined to do social things. Like I think the only gig I've been to all year was when I did my own performance at Eternity with my friend from last year's Hello Scream. That's the only gig that I've been to, and it's one I was performing at. That's the only performance I've done this year as well. Yeah, so I just once I got the schizoid diagnosis, I think I became a bit more reluctant to be social because I'm like, okay, this is actually just me, you know? I don't have to keep trying so hard. And I think that's maybe a danger of getting a schizoid diagnosis too early, is you can be tempted to just give up, whereas I didn't know I had schizoid for ages, so I did try, and maybe that's why I'm now covert schizoid, because I learned to act social because I thought, you know, but now that I know this is just how I am, I'm more inclined to just not go places and not do stuff. And I know that frustrates people a little bit, but yeah, I think like schizoids, we don't cause a lot of trouble anywhere, but the main thing that probably upsets the people around us is that we don't want to hang out with them and, you know, or very rarely have the energy for it, and that frustrates them, and then they're like, oh, they don't care about us, and I'm like, well, I don't know who I care about. I think caring is one of those emotions that I'm not really connected to, but I must care to some extent because like, you know, for example, with Marley, like I must care about him because I put so much effort into making his last days as comfortable as I could, and I was crying on camera that day, and yeah, I just don't have this conscious connection to the feeling of caring. It's a bit hard to explain. I guess it's that emotional dissociation thing going on there. But yeah, I know there's a lot of people who do want to hang out with me and would like to see more of me, but I just haven't had the energy. And yeah, I don't know. But I think maybe not the social thing, but I think I do need to get out more because, as I said, my fitness has just gone to shit. And I I do need to participate in society more, so maybe I should try to socialize. Like, yeah, I don't have to pressure myself to, but I can see a benefit to it, and we are a social species, so even if my psychology is this way, there's more of an instinct that we're supposed to, like, we evolved to be social, and so I think there probably is some kind of subconscious, unconscious conflict there that I might not be aware of. I don't know. I'm not sure what to do about the socializing stuff. I think I've made it through most of the trauma stuff. So we'll move on to the dissociation thing. And as I mentioned, wow, this video has gotten longer than my original one that I screwed up. Oh well. As I mentioned a few days ago, my therapist wants me to see a DID specialist. And you can watch that video for more of the details there. I haven't sent the email yet, but I have had at least one friend point out to me that it sounds like I'm making excuses not to when I worry about their focus being too much DID, and so they're going to see me in that lens, regardless of whether it applies. One friend was saying, it sounds like you're just making excuses to not do it. And I guess I do have anxieties about opening up as well, so maybe that's a legitimate criticism. Another thing is, someone commented, about OSDD, which is like, OSDD is the DSM name for it, but I prefer the ICD-11 name, which is partial DID, because it just gets straight to the point. OSDD, I think there's like 4 categories and only one is the relevant one, and so it's a bit confusing. So yeah, the ICD-11 partial DID. Let's just call it that because it's easier to understand what we're talking about. It's a shame the ICD-11, though, doesn't give us shit about schizoid. They basically erased it and just, general personality disorder, so it's harder to figure things out. But whatever, I'll just pick and choose from which ones are convenient at the time. I am half Japanese, so I'm allowed to do that. I can explain that another day. Yeah, so partial DID, someone mentioned that, and yes, I realized that that's possible for me as well, because I don't lose my memory, and but I do have some of the other or similar symptoms to things, so that is a possibility. It might not be a schizoid thing, a schizophrenic thing, the things that I experience, or like schizoid often has a strong fantasy component as well, which I haven't had for a long time, but maybe some of that old fantasy stuff has like bled out into, trying to get out into the outside world, but I'm not really sure of a mechanism that makes that happen. Like schizoids tend to keep it all inside, so why these things are happening that want to come out into the real world, I don't know. So yeah, schizoid fantasy, I don't know that explains it. And then, yeah, things to do with schizophrenia. Was there something else? I feel like there was something else related to schizoid that I was thinking could be maybe overthinking. If I'm just like having an experience and then thinking about it too much and getting myself confused. Those were 3 things that I thought, that I could be experiencing that's different to dissociation, but they're a bit convoluted to justify, so maybe dissociation is the more logical thing. And I just realized I've completely skipped over what I mean by dissociation. So as I mentioned before, obviously I have a bit of like emotional detachment, which I think is a form of dissociation, and when people talk about schizoid dissociation, I think that's what they mean, is the emotional detachment. Dissociation, it just means like detachment from stuff, and then there's a lot of subcategories. So okay, well, with derealization, I think where I get derealization from is actually more adult trauma in terms of having been depressed so much, because depression itself is kind of traumatizing. And, along with some of the existential thoughts that I've had, I think that's led to the derealization where things just don't feel real. Like, life just doesn't feel real sometimes, but I was having some really bad moments of that earlier in the year, I think. And since I've gotten through some of the trauma stuff and accepted where I am a bit more, that's lessened. I'm having less derealization, although I did have it pretty bad after we said goodbye to Marley. Like, we watched him go, and it's just like you go from living and breathing to just being like a teddy. I'm repeating stuff I said on the Patreon version of this video, but yeah, it's sort of like teddy. And especially because they're fluffy. Maybe I would have a different experience if I watched a human pass away, but yeah, watching him go, that messed me up a little bit in terms of reality, because then I came home and I was patting Hope, who is still alive and breathing, but he looks even more like a teddy, and it just was like he could stop breathing at any moment and just become this lifeless thing. And it's messed me up a bit in terms of how I see life, and watching Dexter as well, and when he's killing people, it sort of changed my perception of that a little bit, and made life not seem real, and in a different way. So yeah, that's confusing. And I noticed we just got up to the 40-minute mark. How did this vlog get even longer than the one that got ruined by OBS? I don't know. Yeah, anyway, so my perception of life has gotten a bit messed up, and looking at myself, like, I'm moving around. I could stop moving, like eventually I will stop moving and I'll just be a shriveled pile of meat. It's weird to think about, and so yeah, nothing's real. But I think it's made me feel a bit more at peace with death as well, because, and especially like my own, like I'm here now and I'll just not be here later, and okay, it's not really a big deal. So derealization, fun. I still think I experience some aspects of derealization differently to how it's described by other people. So, I don't know for sure what they're like. Maybe I have a milder version of it than what some people experience. I don't know. Depersonalization, I have had sometimes, especially with my hands. I haven't had that for a while. It's like sometimes I'll look at my hands and they just don't feel real. That's a weird one. But I think I probably get that a little bit less than derealization. The depersonalization, maybe that's worth talking about more. Like, I want to make that video about the ways my sense of self, 3 ways my sense of self is messed up. I'll get onto that at some point, but I might be running out of time already today because this one's gone on too long. And then there's the more identity related dissociation stuff, and I don't want to say too much right now, but that is a thing that I go through, and I think I've made videos about it in the past, but I sort of chicken out or beat around the bush a bit, and yeah, it is confronting to talk to anyone about, but especially like medical people. I avoided talking about it for a long time because I didn't want to be diagnosed with something I didn't have, like schizophrenia, for example. And, I've wondered if it was related to, like, how kids have imaginary friends, for example. And I'm like, maybe I just didn't grow out of that. Or, but there's things that have happened in my life, and I don't know. I want to try and catch up, my current YouTube audience on it, because I know the people who watched me 10 years ago know some of the stuff that I was talking about. But yeah, I've got a lot of new people on the channel, and if I start talking about things without explaining stuff, it'll get confusing. And then there's also stuff that those people who've been watching me the longest won't know about. I mean, I deleted a lot of my old videos, but then there was also a period of time where I stopped YouTubing for a while, and a lot happened in that, and there's some stuff I will never talk about. It'll be an odd day if I ever do. There's a lot of things that happened that are related to that sense of self issues, and yeah, a lot of stuff, and I don't know if I'll be able to open up about things like, it's hard to talk to my current psychologist, and then if I have a DID specialist, it freaks me out a little bit. But I suppose I should do it. It's just, yeah, the top choices also, like, another thing that's difficult is that the top choices are like an hour away if I take public transport. I do have more access to a car now. I hate driving, but I guess I could do that if I have to, because there's not really many of those specialists. I didn't even know there were any DID specialists in Sydney, but apparently there are. So I guess I'll look into it, but yeah, it's too bad I can't talk to my current psychologist. But also, another thing with therapy is my current therapist, in about February, she's going to take 6 months off, so I do actually need to think about some of these things with therapy, like, do I go and see the DID specialist, or do I just see someone else at her clinic, or do I take a break? I'm not really sure what to do next. So yeah, things are a little bit like, and then has it been helping me anyway? I don't know, but I guess because it's hard to open up about the dissociation related stuff, the identity stuff, maybe we probably haven't explored that as much as maybe we should. And so yeah, maybe I am just trying to find excuses not to do it. Uh yeah, I don't know. And it's been a long time since I've opened up properly to anyone about some of the stuff. So yeah, and I think my thoughts are starting to get a little bit confused and distracted, so I might wrap this vlog up now. But that's sort of, I guess, an overview of where I'm at. And, yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Leave me questions and I'll try and, oh, am I getting, like, heaps sweaty? Sorry. I did go for a walk earlier. Anyway, yeah, leave me some questions, because maybe that'll help me figure out where I'm going. I might live stream on Monday, but I haven't decided, so watch out for that. And then I've got other things going on. And I'm sorry for like new people who've subscribed who don't realize how chaotic I am, because chances are the next video after this will just be lizards in my garden, because I've already filmed that video. So, yeah, I don't have any particular focus on this channel. I just do what I like. And you have to deal with it. You can just skip those videos though, that's fine. I just notice it's funny when my subscriber count goes up and then I post a video that no one asked for and then it goes back down, and it gives me a little bit of a giggle, because today's YouTube is so sanitized, and then here comes me doing whatever the heck I want. Anyway, I'll catch you guys later. Perhaps with some thoughts that I forgot to add in this video, or perhaps to answer some of your questions, or to just show you lizards and ants and whatever.